So a couple of weeks ago, we started a study on the book of Jonah. We love the story of Jonah, but many times it just stops there. Just a story. We really don't spend much time thinking about the book of Jonah. Maybe because it doesn't seem to have a big theological weight, the book of Jonah. And yet, as we go a little deeper, as we study a little more the book of Jonah, we realize that Jonah presents a picture of God that we may not find in many other places in the Bible. And so I believe it's important to understand the book of Jonah. And we started a couple of weeks ago by just looking at the background of the book of Jonah. And so we realized, or we learned, that the book was written just about 793 to 753 before Christ. There's still a bit of a conversation. Some theologians and experts say that it was much earlier than that or much later than that. So the dates are still a little conflictuous, but the majority points out, or the majority of theologians point out to this particular date. We don't know who wrote the book of Jonah. Even though it's the story of Jonah, we're not certain on who the author of the book is. And from the book of Jonah, we know that he's the son of Amittai, and he's the prophet from Gath-Hepher. And the Second Kings also mentions Jonah as being the son of Amittai, the prophet from Gath-Hepher, who had a message regarding the borders of the country. So that's basically what we know about Jonah. Interesting, and I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, so I'm just kind of flying through it as a summary to bring back a little bit of the context. Interesting that the book of Jonah, contrary to many other books from the Old Testament where you have the prophet and only a few details about the prophet and then many chapters about their theology, the book of Jonah is the opposite. You have just about 2-3 verses about his theology, about his message, and the rest of the book is about the prophet. So that's a little bit of a difference between the book of Jonah and other books such as Ezekiel, Daniel, Jeremiah, and so on and so forth. Some applications regarding the book of Jonah is that we can also be inconsistent. Just as Jonah was inconsistent with his beliefs and his actions, we also can be inconsistent nowadays within our spiritual journey. We are also selfish, just as Jonah was selfish, obviously, in our lives, we can also be selfish. God takes care of all. Doesn't matter if you're Seventh-day Adventist, Catholic or Pentecostal, God takes care of all of us. Doesn't matter if you're a Gentile or a Jew, God takes care of all. And finally, God is the God of second chances. Now, these are just some applications pertaining to the book of Jonah. Obviously, as you read, as you study, more applications then can come up to you because it becomes a personal reading. Now, we talked a little bit about the authenticity of the book, and some people have questioned the book. This book is not true. And they base this reasoning on the fact that it was too impossible to have such an event like the big fish eating Jonah and taking Jonah to the shore 3 days later and throwing him up. It is just too impossible for that to happen. And I showed you then several miracles that happen in the scriptures. And then the question was, if we are okay accepting all the other miracles, then by principle we should be okay accepting the story of Jonah and the big fish. And so if we are okay accepting the fact that the Red Sea separated and 2+ million people crossed over in dry land, why do we struggle with the story of the big fish? Right? So we talked about it a little bit regarding the authenticity of the book of Jonah. And today, we're going to go on chapter 1. We finished last sermon a couple of weeks ago on Jesus' perspective, the book of Jonah. And we talked about the fact that Jesus refers to Jonah when he was talking about his death and his resurrection. Today, I would like to invite you to open your Bibles on chapter 1, the book of Jonah. And he starts with a very few texts that are very specific. So, are you there? Book of Jonah, chapter 1. All right, I'm going to start reading. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. Arise, go to Nineveh. Jonah was a prophet in Israel, the northern kingdom. Jonah was a prophet. And now the word of the Lord came to him and said, Arise and go to Nineveh. We study a little bit about Nineveh, and we realized that Nineveh was a bad city, bad town. Somewhat important at that time, it was the capital of the Assyrian Empire, the Assyrian nation, and they were coming down to afflict the Israelites. So the mood, the perceptions that Jonah had against the Assyrians were not the greatest. They were mean people. Nahum describes the city as a bloody city, as a deceitful and lies city, where people just take advantage of each other. And now God is telling, arise and go to Nineveh. And my first question is, has God ever told you, arise and go? Have you felt that call, arise and go? God told Abraham, arise and go. No explanations other than the promise, I'll make a big nation out of you. And Abraham went, arise and go. God is calling Jonah for something. In this particular case, it's very specific. Arise and go and preach a message over there. And Jonah was supposed to go. When we were in Kelowna, my family and I, before we came here, we were well there. We were fine. Life was good for us. The churches were going well. We're growing. We're thriving. The school was thriving. My children were happy. And God says, arise and go. And here we are. Here we are. There's been other moments where God says, arise and go, and we do not go. We do not go. But here we are. Why? Don't know. But God said, arise and go. Now, I'm not saying to all of you, arise and go. That's not what I mean. But what I'm saying is that when God calls you, what do you say? What do you answer to that call? When God calls you and says, arise and go and witness to somebody else, what do you say to that call? When God calls and says, arise and help at the church, what do you say to that call? When God says, arise and go, how do we answer to that call? But Jonah rose, verses 3, to flee to Tarshish before the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Arise and go. And we can see Jonah's journey. See if that can come up. There you go. Jonah is in Israel, and he journeys south to Joppa right there. He was supposed to come here, Nineveh. And yet, he got on a boat to travel to Tarshish. Right by Spain, or right in Spain. By Portugal, by the way. Right? Beautiful country of Portugal right there. Okay? If you ever want to go there, let me know. I'll carry your luggage. All right? God called Jonah to go in one direction, and he goes exactly in the opposite direction. Arise and go, but Jonah rose to flee from God. Jonah is running away from God, and so he got on a ship and he goes in the opposite direction. And how many times do we do that? Now, I have a question, and I would like for us to talk a little bit. Why many times do we run from God? That's what Jonah is doing. Jonah is running from God. He's fleeing from God. And the reality is that many times I run from God. Do you agree with that? Why do we do that? Let's process this for a few minutes. Why do we run from God? Any ideas? Gerald. That's a good one. That's a very good one. Many times we just don't recognize His voice. And we doubt, right? We start wondering what His will is. Very good one. What else? What else? Why do we run from God? We are afraid. Going into the unknown can be quite scary. Why am I being called to go there? I don't know what's going to happen there. And I love to hear the stories of missionaries that go in Africa and they go into the jungle and they go to these places. And we get sad when we hear that one of them died or was killed or had an accident. But somehow it's exciting to us. And yet when He comes to us, whoa, maybe we're afraid. That's right. What else? Why do we run from God? Sorry? We don't want to leave our comfort zone. Isn't that interesting? Do you want to expand a little more on that? No? Okay. All right, that's fine. God calls me, come to church. Okay, I'm comfortable here at church. Now God says, arise and come and preach. And the pastor one day approaches you and says, hey, would you like to preach? Oh, no. No. I just want to stay here. We need help with the sound upstairs. Would you like to help? No. We don't want to leave our comfort zone. Maybe that's not the direction you're thinking, but since I develop a little more on leaving the comfort zone, I add my own thoughts to it. Lacking in faith, right? Lacking maybe on understanding of what our talents are, right? Which, by the way, thank you for mentioning that, because on June 23rd, in the afternoon, Pastor Ernbrake will be here with us, and he's going to lead a seminar on our spiritual gifts, spiritual talents, trying to understand our talents and what the Scriptures say about it. So make sure you schedule that afternoon where take it off, be here, where Pastor Ernbrake is going to lead us through that seminar. But that's true. Maybe we just don't think that we have the talent or the ability for something that we're being called to do. Why do we run from God? A few ideas that I put. We run because we're scared, right? That was just my thoughts, my ideas. We run because we're prideful or rebellious. The pride that keeps us from coming to church. The pride that pushes away from everybody else. The pride that keeps us from engaging with God. Maybe we run because we've been hurt. Have you thought about that? I was hurt. I'm not coming to church. That person. Start pointing fingers. The blame, the hurt, and it keeps me away from God. Maybe we run because we believe the lie that God's presence is not what is best for us. Why? I mean, a lot more can be said. These are just a few answers. Why do we run from God? Now, then the other question is, how do we run from God? What actions do we have that lead us to run from God? Any thoughts? How can we run from God? Not the why anymore. Now it's the how. Now we leave the intellectual part aside and we go to the active. How do we actively run from God? Any thoughts? Say it again, I'm sorry. We distract ourselves doing other things. Good one. Yeah, we distract ourselves doing other things. Should have talked to you before I put this on the screen. I would have get a few more ideas. Yes. Good. What else? How do we run from God? We start doing things that we know God does not want us to do. It's a choice, right? Yeah. What else? How do I run from God? One more idea. They were sincerely wrong in their spirituality, right? Does that go in the same direction of what you're thinking? Yeah? The Pharisees did a whole bunch of things. They had a whole bunch of rules and regulations. This you need to do, this you cannot do. This has to be this way, this cannot be that way. And yet, they were blindfolded to what religion should have been. The blessing that God told Abraham that the Israelites would be, or the Jewish would be, to the nations, were being shrinked by the Pharisees, keeping all of it in rules and regulations. It's a good one. I like that one. A couple ideas, again, that I put there. When we stop attending spiritual meetings, a very simple one. When we stop coming to church, we're stopping fellowshipping with each other. We're stopping engaging in a vertical relationship with God and in a horizontal relationship. We're running from God. We say, where two or three are gathered together, what do we say? God is there. And suddenly you start skipping church. And the more you skip, the easier, mentally speaking, becomes to skip church, right? And it's not, that consistency will just lead to more and more and more, and we're breaking that vertical relationship when we stop attending spiritual meetings, or when we stop having devotional time with God. We could also add when we stop praying, for example. When we say that if we go back to God, people will judge us. When we use grace as an excuse to live in sin. These are excuses. These are excuses. The reality is that we're just running from God. Now, these are just some ideas. These are just some thoughts that I put there on the screen. But these are actions that many times we go through, many times we do without even realizing that we are running from God. God is calling us to go in one direction, and we're turning back and going in a totally different direction. One more question. So what happens when we run from God? Have you thought about that? What happens when we run from God? The what? No blessings. Okay, good one. Hold your thought on that. What? No peace. Interesting. No peace. What else? What happens when we run from God? God keeps up with us? Hold that thought. If I forget, I want to add something to that. The what? We encounter storms, and then for sure Jonah found a big one on his path, right? I think there's we can hurt innocent people. Our actions have a rippled effect. If I'm running from God, my actions will have an impact on other people. If I'm running towards God, my actions will have an impact on other people. Think about it. A father who is abusive towards the mother. The husband, he's abusive towards the wife. Will that have an impact on the kids? Absolutely, right? No doubts about that. A pastor A pastor that has an affair with a church member. And this comes to my mind because this week I was doing a training on sexual harassment, mandatory training from the conference. So I was looking into that. A pastor that has an affair with a church member, will that have an impact on the church community at large? Absolutely. Innocent people that now are being affected by the fact that that father or that pastor or that leader or that deacon or whoever it is are running away from God. Innocent people. Many times we focus on us. Well, I don't want to go there, I don't want to be there, but we forget everybody else. My absence will have an impact on those that come here. Because suddenly they look around, oh, where's Pastor Roger? Oh, where's so-and-so? Where are they? My absence will have an impact on that. The same way that my presence will be an encouraging, will bring an encouraging perspective eventually to other people. So we hurt innocent people. We miss God's blessing, as Narda was saying. And one of them can be, we can lose our spiritual power. And you can read them Psalms later on. We can also lose our sense of purpose. Why do we come to church? To serve or to be served? To be worshipped or to worship? We can lose our sense of purpose. We might even, to a certain extent, after running away from God for so long, lose our desire to live. Jonah got to the point that he was saying, just throw me overboard. He didn't want to lose. He didn't want to leave anymore. Jonah ran away from God. Now, and I'm just trying to bring to you a perspective. Why we do something, how we do it, and the effects, and what happened. And I hope that you understand the impact, it spreads out to the community, and not just to the one person. But the Lord, verses 4, but the Lord sent out a great wind, on the sea. And there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship was about to be broken up. Now, Jonah got on the ship, they're on their way. And suddenly there's a storm coming. These are experienced sailors. They would have not left port if a storm was coming. So they were caught unprepared. They did not know it was coming. It just suddenly came like that. So then the mariners were afraid, and every man cried out to his God. And they threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten the load. But Jonah had gone down into the lowest parts of the ship, had lain down, and was fast asleep. Now try to picture this. This is a big storm. The experienced sailors are afraid. These are people, they're not Jewish. So they are now, each one of them crying out to their own gods. Oh, save me, save us, do something, protect us, don't let us die. Each one of them trying because they see it coming. They are going to die. And yet, what is Jonah doing? He went down, sleeping. The original word, it's very interesting. The original word says that he was so deep asleep that he was even snoring. So when he says here fast asleep, you can add the sound effect to that, because that's how deep Jonah was sleeping. Now picture the boat going left and right, up and down, and Jonah is sleeping in that boat. So the captain came to him and said to him, "What do you mean, sleeper? Arise, call on your God. Perhaps your God will consider us so that we may not perish." The captain is baffled. Why are you sleeping? We're all calling out for our gods. We're desperate. We are desperate. Call out to your God. Maybe he will be the one that will listen to the prayers of all of us and will actually come or will actually save us. So they said to one another, "Come, let us cast lots, that we may know for whose cause this trouble has come upon us." So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. By coincidence, they cast lots, and poor Jonah, you were discovered. So they said to him, "Please tell us, for whose cause is this trouble upon us? What is your occupation? And where do you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you?" They're trying to find out. Interesting that God used the casting of the lots to pinpoint towards Jonah. Jonah, who before was asleep, now finds himself in the middle, in the center of the attention of all these people. So he said to them, "I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." Do you know what Jonah is saying? You know what Jonah is doing? In the middle of the storm, Jonah is witnessing. You realize that? In the middle of the storm, Jonah is saying, "I am a Hebrew, and I fear the one that created all. The creator of the heavens and the earth, the creator of the heavens and the sea, the creator of everything. That's the one I worship. Forget every other God. This is the one I worship. This is the right God. This is the big God." Now, interesting the word that he uses there, "I fear." Some other versions have the word worship. And I was very curious about this word fear. Is Jonah afraid of God when he says, "I fear God," or when he says, "I fear God," is it in a sense of worship? You know what conclusion I came? I still don't know. The word for worship, with this idea of fear, being reverence, being awe, the original word is the same word as the word of being afraid. I fear. So we can actually read, "I fear the God because he made the heavens and the earth and he has the power to do all of these. I fear him." Or he can say, "I fear God because he created the heavens and the earth." He can witness in a different way here. But we can continue. And maybe down a few verses, we'll get a better idea of what the meaning of this word is. "So then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, 'Why have you done this?' For the men knew that he fled from the presence of the Lord, because he told them. So then they said to him, 'What shall we do to you that the sea may be calm for us?'" You get the question? What shall we do to you so that the sea may calm? What idea is this? Where is this concept coming from? What shall we do to you? Human sacrifices? Does that ring a bell? Pagan gods? Pagan nations? Punishment? What shall I do to you? And it opens the door for a lot of ideas, but Jonah walked through that door. And so Jonah said, so they said, "What shall we do to you that the sea may become for us?" For the sea was growing more tempestuous. So the intensity of the sea is increasing. And so on, he said to them, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then the sea will become calm for you. For I know that this great tempest is because of me." Why is Jonah giving them this answer? Why is Jonah telling them, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea"? Any ideas? Any thoughts? Jonah could have easily said, "This is because I'm running away from God. Let me go have a moment with God and repent and everything will be fine." But Jonah was very specific. "Pick me up, throw me in the sea." Why? Have you thought? Shame? He wanted to die? Why would he want to die? Any ideas? Maybe? I think it goes deeper than that, though. Okay. Maybe he doesn't want to save the people. Okay. He was sorry. I'm sorry about many of my sins, but I never said, God, please kill me. Or other people, please kill me. I mean, I understand what you're saying. And so I'm trying to understand Jonah's mindset.
I think God put the thought in his mind.
You think?
It's such a bizarre, unrealistic thought for humans to have.
On his mind, Jonah is thinking about death. He had no idea that a great fish would go to pick him up. Yes, Narda. Okay. Okay. So so he's having some altruistic thoughts. But that doesn't answer the question. Why then would he say, God, kill me? How many times have we not chosen God's will? You understand what I'm trying to get to? And this is me thinking. Okay, I saw. He didn't understand what? Forgiveness. Okay, we're getting somewhere. On my thoughts, on my study, I think the big issue here is that Jonah really never understood God in himself, in its true essence. Jonah is thinking of a punishing God. God, he's going to punish me because I ran away from him. God is going to kill me. Then let's just get this over with and save the other sailors, the other seamen. Let's just get it over with. Just throw me overboard. He was not brave enough to jump himself. Right? Very altruistic thought, yes, but he was not brave enough to jump himself. But he's saying, God, he's going to punish me. Where did this idea come from? Pagans. Pagans. The idea of the sacrifice. We need to do something to appease God. God, throw me overboard and the sea will be fine. We have appeased God. Do you understand what I'm saying? How many times you've seen the basket going around in the church and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to give my tithe and the Lord's going to bless me. Have you thought about that? Many times we give our tithe and our offering to gain what? God's favor. Many times we come to church to gain what? God's favor. All of those, as beautiful as they might be, bring the perspective of a God that we need to appease. And Jonah was running away from God, right? Jonah was fleeing from God, and yet God was coming after him. Not to kill him, but to redirection him. Do you notice that? Now, what picture is this from God? One running away, fearing a fearful killer God, let's put it that way, punishing God. The other one, God himself, coming to bring Jonah back on the right path. Why would Jonah go to Nineveh if the picture he had of God was of a mean, punishing God? And so even when he got to Nineveh, we're fast-forwarding on the story a little bit, he got upset because in his message, repent, repent, but then he sits down on top of the mountain looking down, front seat row, expecting a big show, similar to Sodom and Gomorrah. His concept of God was of a God that was the mean, vengeful, punishing God. And he never understood that God was actually a God of love that wants people to be saved, does not want to punish people. So Jonah is saying, you know what? If I die, the seas will be calm. I will appease God's wrath. God is coming after me because he's upset with me. And that is a pagan idea. So Jonah tells them, throw me. But the sailors now have an interesting response. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to return to land. But they could not, for the sea continued to grow more tempestuous against them. Therefore they cried out to the Lord, Jonah's Lord, and said, we pray, O Lord, please do not let us perish for these men's life, and do not charge us with innocent blood. For you, O Lord, have done as it pleases you. You see how his testimony now has impacted the sailors to believe God as being a mean, vengeful, punishing God? Salvation through the eyes of Jonah. This is what Jonah is preaching. This is the salvation message that Jonah is preaching. But that's many times the message that we preach ourselves. They are afraid that if they kill a man, then God will punish them. They are afraid, the sailors, they're afraid that if they kill Jonah, which was a prophet of God, a man that God had selected for a purpose, God will go after them. So they resist. They resist until they couldn't resist anymore. So they picked up Jonah and threw him into the sea. And the sea ceased from its raging. They picked up Jonah, threw him into the sea, and that was it. Calm. Then the man feared the Lord exceedingly and offered a sacrifice to the Lord and took vows. Now understand, these are pagan men. They don't know exactly how to worship God. So they're doing what they think they need to do to worship God. Now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Was that great fish a punishment for Jonah? What was the fish then? What was the purpose of the fish? Salvation. Was God's plan that Jonah would jump overboard? But he had a plan B in case Jonah would do that. God's plan is to save everybody. Everybody. And he works plan B, C, D, E, F, and G. And how many plans so he can be there. And we keep on running from him. We keep on running away from God. And there he is. Constantly, there he is. We can run away from him, but we cannot escape God's love for us. Have you thought about that? No matter how much we run away from him, how far we go, it feels like he's still there. He's just right with us. We can never escape his love. Jonah learned the lesson, but not the full lesson yet. 3 days he spent inside that fish. He took matters into his own hands. He thought that to appease God, he needed to die. He wasn't brave enough to do that. So he told the sailors, throw me overseas. But that wasn't God's plan. God just wanted Jonah to come back, to go in the right direction. Seeing everything, God sent a big fish. We don't know if it's a whale. We don't know if it was a big fish. Depends on the version you read. The scriptures in its original don't really say much. But God was showing Jonah a totally different perspective on the issue of salvation, on the issue of God's love. So what lessons can we gather from chapter 1? God allows storms to redirect us. I emphasize the word allows. A few years ago, Ruth brought home an article from Ellen White. And it was right on the purpose of trials, titled the article. Remember that? Where she wrote, let's see, a refining, purifying process is going on among the people of God. And the Lord of hosts has set his hand to do this work. This process is most trying to the soul, but it is necessary in order that defilement may be removed. Trials are essential in order that we may be brought closer to our Heavenly Father in submission to His will, that we may offer unto the Lord an offering of righteousness. Are you following that? Trials are essential. God's work of refining and purifying the soul must go on until His servants are so humbled, so dead to self, that when called into active service, arise and go, they may have an eye single to the glory of God. Trials are essential. She goes on and she says, the purification of God's people cannot be accomplished without suffering. God permits, okay? God permits the fire of affliction to consume the dross, to separate the worthless from the valuable, in order that the pure metal may shine forth. He passes us from one fire to another, testing our true worth. Haven't you noticed that when you're going through trials, that's when it seems that you are closer to God? Have you not experienced that? Now, God is not sending those trials to afflict us, but He's using them to remind us that He's right there with us. She also said, it is by close testing trials that God brings His people near to Himself. For in trial and temptation, He discovers to them their weaknesses and teaches them to lean upon Him as their only help and safeguard. When this result is attained, His object is accomplished, and His tried servants are prepared to be used in every emergency, to fill important positions of trust, and to accomplish the grand purpose for which their powers were given to them. God takes man upon trial, and He proves them upon the right hand and upon the left until they are educated, trained, and disciplined for His use. Beloved, I know that we all face challenges. We all go through trials. It could be health. Just recently, a member from the Sioux Church, she's in the hospital. The doctor was sent to the hospital. She wanted to drive to the hospital, as I was, John, you were sharing with me. She wanted to drive to the hospital, and the doctor was like, no, I'm calling an ambulance for you. That's how urgent the situation was. And now she's in the hospital Tuesday, she's going to have an open heart surgery. Trials. We all experience trials. We all experience financial challenges. I shared with you a few weeks ago about my cars. But God is working through that. God is right there, helping us, allowing us, and guiding us through these tests, purifying tests. We call it the sanctification, the journey, sanctification, where we are go one step forward, sometimes two step back, where our characters are being developed to become much more like God. God takes men upon trial, and He proves them upon the right hand and upon the left until they are educated, trained, and disciplined for His use. So that was lesson 1. God allows storms to redirect us. Lesson 2, God opens doors of opportunity for us to testify. The caring and sharing time that we have here, it's a great moment for that, where we can say, this week, God has done this for me. I've seen God work in my life this way. I've seen God work in my life that way. I need prayers from everybody. I need all of us to come together and pray. My brother's in the hospital. My sister is hurting and she's suffering. I have a health issue. I need prayers. Doors of opportunity for us to testify. A few weeks ago we were praying, and guess what happened? God gave me the answer. God gave me the solution. Praise be the Lord. You know what I'm saying? That's a great time, great opportunity. The trials bring this opportunity for us to testify. But our eyes need to be open to recognize God's intervention. Sometimes, just like Gerald mentioned several minutes ago. We just cannot hear God's voice. Sometimes our eyes are so blinded, so close to our problems and to everything that goes around, to our distractions, that we forget. We did not even see His intervention in our lives. So God opens the door for us to testify. Salvation comes when we surrender to Him. To Jonah, that was the moment salvation came to him, when he jumped over, or when he was thrown overboard. And guess what Ellen White also says? If we surrender our lives to His service, we can never be placed in a position for which God has not made provision. Sometimes we're afraid. I'm going to surrender my life to God, and I'm afraid because He may ask me to do something. We surrender our lives to His service, we can never be placed in a position for which God has not made provision. And if He has made provision, then guess what? He's right there. He's going to guide you. He's going to walk with you. He's going to lead you through that. And finally, last lesson. Our spiritual relationship will always have an impact on someone else. We talked a little bit about that, so I'm not going to expand. But our spiritual relationship will always have an impact on someone else. Jonah is starting to uncover, to discover who God is. Jonah is now understanding that maybe the God that I've grown to know is not actually the God that is calling me to go to Nineveh. Maybe the picture of God that I have is not accurate. Jonah, through trials, through surrendering, is learning that. Beloved, I want to encourage you as you go through your trials. Just hang in there. As you run away from God, just remember you cannot run away from His love. So just hang in there. He is right there with you. He is not the mean, vengeful, punishing God. He's the God that wants to save us. He's the God that wants to take us to heaven. He's the God that wants to spend eternity with us. He's the one that came down and died for all of us. Hold on to that. Even if you're giving a few steps back on our sanctification, on our journey, remember He is right there. Hold on to that. God will never leave us nor abandon us. And if you're doubting, just go to Romans 8. Romans 8, 38 and 39. My favorite text in the Bible. There is nothing that can separate us from the love of God. Nothing. And Romans gives us a description. Paul describes neither this, neither that, neither things that are above and beyond what we can conceive, nor angels, nor the demons, nor nothing. There is nothing that can separate us. So it doesn't matter how far you've run from God, salvation is there for you. He is the God that wants to save you. He is the God that is chasing you, that is coming after you, that is allowing storms to redirect you and bring you back. There is nothing that can separate us